The kingdom of Eldara had known peace for centuries, nestled between towering mountain ranges and endless fields of golden grain. Its castle stood proud, and the air always carried the sweet scent of wildflowers. The people of Eldara lived simple lives, unaware that the darkness of the world was slowly creeping toward them. Until that day, it began with a whisper in the wind, a shadow that appeared in the distant hills. The scouts, who had always kept watch for any threat, saw nothing but dust and silence. But when the first bolt of lightning cracked the sky, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The earth seemed to shake in terror as the earth's veins began to bleed shadow. Kalen, a young man of 20 winters, stood at the edge of the kingdom's training grounds, his bow in hand, his thoughts lost in the hum of arrows whistling through the air. He wasn't a soldier, not like his father. His father, once the kingdom's greatest knight, had disappeared years ago, leaving behind only the echo of a legacy. Kalen, a voice called from behind. His mentor, Bran, the head of Eldara's archers, stepped forward, his face drawn with worry. "You've been training for hours. The king summons. It's urgent." Kalen wiped the sweat from his brow, confusion crossing his face. He had heard rumors of strange happenings beyond the kingdom's borders, but he never imagined the king would seek his aid. "What does the king need with me?" he asked, tightening his grip on the bow. Bran's expression darkened. "The kingdom is under attack. The Darklands, they've risen again. The Shadowlord returns." Kalen felt the weight of the words settle into his chest like an iron stone. The Shadowlord, an ancient evil long believed vanquished, had returned. The stories from his father's time, the ones his mother whispered at night, had always seemed like old legends. But they were no longer just stories. They were real. As Kalen raced toward the castle, his heart pounded in his chest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the land, and there was a strange chill in the air. The trees swayed with an unnatural wind, and the birds had stopped singing. The kingdom had always been alive with sound, but now it was eerily silent. The throne room was abuzz with frantic voices as Kalen entered, his steps echoing on the marble floor. The king, once a figure of calm and wisdom, was now trembling, his face pale with fear. "Kalen," the king said, his voice wavering, "I've called you here because we have no other choice. You are the last hope of Eldara." Kalen knelt before the throne. "Your Majesty, I'm just an archer. I don't understand. What can I do?" The king looked at him with haunted eyes, a man who had seen too much. "You carry your father's legacy. You are the only one who can wield the pendant. It's the last piece of ancient magic that can defeat the Shadowlord." Kalen's mind raced as the words sank in. His father, the pendant. The stories from his youth flooded back to him, how his father was a knight of great renown, how he disappeared without a trace. No one had ever spoken of a pendant. But before Kalen could ask more, the king pressed a small, gleaming object into his hand. "Take this," the king said, his voice urgent. "You must go at once. The kingdom's survival depends on it." Kalen's eyes widened as he held the pendant. It was a silver medallion, intricate and glowing faintly with a power he couldn't comprehend. As his fingers brushed its surface, a jolt of energy surged through him. For a brief moment, his vision blurred, and a vision of a darkened world flashed before his eyes. The quest for Eldara's survival had begun. But what Kalen didn't know was that the path ahead would not only test his bravery but also his very soul. The pendant would reveal more than he could ever imagine, and the truth of his father's past would soon be known. The moon hung low over the kingdom of Eldara, casting an eerie glow across the land. The once bustling streets of the kingdom had fallen silent, the only sounds being the rustling of trees in the distant forests and the wind whispering through the cracks in the stone walls of Eldara's mighty castle. Kaelin's heart was heavy, his mind swirling with confusion and fear as he stood alone on the castle's battlements, staring out into the distance. The weight of the king's words still echoed in his ears. Only you, Kaelin, can save Eldara. The pendant, your father's legacy, is our last hope. His father, the name that had once filled him with pride, now felt like a shadow, a specter that haunted his every step. Kaelin had always believed his father had died honorably, fighting for the kingdom. But the truth was far darker than he could have ever imagined. The pendant he held, an ancient artifact imbued with unimaginable power, was tied to his father's legacy, and it was this very legacy that had now brought chaos to the kingdom. He turned the pendant over in his hand, feeling its weight, the strange energy pulsing through it. The vision he'd had earlier, the one of darkness, fire, and despair, haunted him still. It felt as though the pendant was trying to speak to him, whispering secrets he wasn't ready to hear. Kaelin, a voice called out, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to see Eldara approaching, her face set in determination, though the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She had always been a warrior, strong and fierce, but even she couldn't mask the uncertainty of what lay ahead. "We've gathered the others," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Varian and Lyra are waiting for you. We need to move quickly. The Shadowlord's forces are already on the move." Kaelin nodded, tucking the pendant into his cloak. "I know," he replied, his voice quieter than he intended. "But there's something I'm not telling you." Eldara's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Kaelin hesitated. "My father. I've just learned something I never knew. The Shadowlord, he was once a knight of Eldara, a close ally of my father. But something changed. Something twisted him, and I think my father is alive, and he's the one leading the Shadowlord's army." Eldara's eyes widened, the shock and disbelief on her face palpable. "No, that can't be. Your father was a hero. He died defending the kingdom. You can't mean it." "I don't know what to believe anymore," Kaelin said, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "But if it's true, then everything I've been fighting for, everything I thought I understood about this war, is a lie." The next morning, Kaelin and his companions set out for the southern border where the Darklands lay. The journey was long and treacherous, the terrain growing harsher as they approached the Cursed Lands. The air seemed thicker hay, as if the very earth itself had absorbed the corruption of the Shadowlord. Every step forward felt like they were venturing deeper into the unknown. The group was tense, each member lost in their thoughts as they traveled. Varian, the mysterious wizard, had been silent for days. Kaelin couldn't shake the feeling that the wizard knew more than he let on. He'd always been elusive, a man of secrets and strange gestures. But now, as the stakes grew higher, Kaelin couldn't afford to ignore the nagging suspicion in his gut. "Eldara," Kaelin said, his voice low as they walked. "Do you trust Varian?" She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "He's the only wizard who could help us. I don't trust him with my life, but I trust him with the mission. That's all that matters now." Kaelin wasn't convinced. Something about Varian didn't sit right with him, but he didn't have time to investigate further. The kingdom was falling apart, and the Shadowlord's forces were marching ever closer. After days of traveling, they reached the outskirts of the Darklands. The land here was barren, a twisted landscape of jagged rocks and dying trees. The sky above was perpetually dark, as if the sun had been swallowed by the shadow that hung over the land. As they ventured deeper, the temperature dropped, and the winds howled, carrying with them whispers that seemed to come from the very earth itself. Kalen felt a chill in his bones, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. Every step forward felt like an intrusion, like they were trespassing into something far older and more dangerous than they could comprehend. Finally, they reached the Shadowlord's fortress, a towering structure of black stone that seemed to reach up to the heavens. The air around it crackled with dark magic, and Kalen could feel the presence of something malevolent within its walls. "This is it," Eldara said, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. "The Shadowlord's domain." Kalen looked at the fortress, his heart pounding. This was it, the final confrontation. They had to act quickly, before the Shadowlord could unleash his full power on the kingdom. But something in the back of his mind nagged at him. The pendant around his neck seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, as if it was calling to him. "Kalen," Varian said, his voice low and urgent, "we need to be careful. This place is more than just a fortress. It's a prison for something far darker than you can imagine." "What do you mean?" Kalen asked, his brow furrowing. Varian's eyes darkened. "There is a force here, a power so ancient that it predates even the Shadowlord. It's why he was drawn here, and it's why your father turned. He wasn't corrupted by the Shadowlord, he was possessed." As the group made their way into the fortress, the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on them, and Kalen's mind raced as he tried to make sense of everything that had been revealed to him. His father wasn't just alive, he had been consumed by something far worse than death. And now, Kalen was about to face whatever dark force had turned his father into the very monster they were trying to defeat. They reached the inner sanctum of the fortress, a massive chamber that was bathed in a sickly green light. At its center stood a massive altar, and on the altar lay a figure, bound and still. The Shadowlord. But as Kalen approached, his breath caught in his throat. The figure on the altar was not the Shadowlord, but a man, his father, still alive but twisted beyond recognition. His once proud armor was now a broken shell, his eyes vacant and empty. And then it hit him. The pendant. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key. Kalen stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. The truth was clearer now than it had ever been. His father had been the key all along, the one who had opened the gates to the darkness. He had been consumed by it, his soul lost to the abyss, leaving only a puppet for the Shadowlord to control. "Father!" Kalen cried out, his voice cracking. "Father, wake up! It's me. I've come to save you." But his father didn't respond. Instead, the Shadowlord's laugh echoed through the chamber, a deep, bone-chilling sound that reverberated through the walls. "You think you can save him?" the Shadowlord's voice boomed. "He was always mine. And now, so are you." Suddenly, the pendant in Kalen's hand glowed with blinding light, and a force beyond comprehension surged through him. The walls of the fortress trembled as an explosion of magic ripped through the air. Kalen felt himself being pulled, the world around him spinning out of control. "Kalen!" Eldara screamed, reaching for him, but it was too late. The magic consumed him, pulling him into a vortex of swirling darkness. The last thing Kalen saw before the darkness swallowed him whole was his father's twisted face, his eyes open, but empty. And then, nothing. The darkness that enveloped Kaelin was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't the physical darkness of night, but a suffocating weight, a force that reached into the very core of his being and tried to tear him apart. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, just endless, black void. Then, in an instant, the world around him shattered like glass. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sound of distant whispers that gnawed at his sanity. Kaelin gasped for air, but his chest constricted as if he were drowning in the very air itself. He was no longer in the Darklands, nor the Shadowlord's fortress. He was somewhere else, somewhere deeper. With a desperate breath, he summoned all the strength he had left to stand. The pendant still hung around his neck, its warmth strangely comforting despite the terror that gripped him. As his senses returned, he realized he wasn't alone. He could feel the presence of something powerful, ancient. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked in robes woven from the very fabric of night itself. Kaelin's heart skipped a beat as the figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It was the Shadowlord, but there was something different about him. His form was more ethereal, less corporeal. He was like a ghost, an ancient being of darkness that had never truly lived, only existed. "Welcome, Kaelin," the Shadowlord's voice boomed, low and dangerous. "I've been waiting for you." Kaelin's pulse quickened. His hand instinctively gripped the pendant, but it did nothing to ease the dread rising within him. The Shadowlord's words echoed in his mind. "You think you can stop me?" the Shadowlord continued, a twisted smile curving his lips. "Your father was the key to all of this, and now you are too." A cold shiver ran down Kaelin's spine. He remembered his father's face, the twisted, broken man lying on the altar. But now, standing before the Shadowlord, he understood the full scope of what had happened. His father had not only betrayed the kingdom but had been consumed by the very darkness that Kaelin had fought to destroy. And now it seemed that Kaelin, too, was bound to the same fate. "Your father was the first," the Shadowlord continued, his voice dripping with malice. "A man who once swore loyalty to Eldara. But what is loyalty to a kingdom that shuns its own? I offered him power, Kaelin, power beyond anything he could have imagined. And he took it, willingly. And now you will join him." Kaelin's grip on the pendant tightened. It pulsed against his skin, responding to the Shadowlord's words like a living thing. The realization hit him with the force of a thunderclap. His father hadn't just been corrupted. He had been chosen by something far older, far more powerful than anything Kaelin had ever known. "You see," the Shadowlord continued, "I am not a mere mortal. I am an entity, a force older than this world. The kingdom of Eldara was built on the blood of the innocents, and now it will fall. But I need one last thing. You, Kaelin." Kaelin's head spun. His father had been a part of this, had been drawn into this web of darkness. But it wasn't just about his father. It was about Eldara, his home, his people, the life he had known. All of it was slipping through his fingers. Was there any hope left? "Why me?" Kaelin managed to choke out, his voice hoarse. "What do you want with me?" The Shadowlord's laughter rumbled through the air, deep and terrifying. "You are the last piece of the puzzle, Kaelin. Your father was only a means to an end. The true power lies within you. Your blood, your legacy. You are the heir to the kingdom's ruin, and I will make sure you fulfill your destiny." Kaelin staggered back, his mind racing. Everything he had believed, everything he had fought for, was collapsing. His father, the kingdom, his purpose, none of it mattered anymore. The Shadowlord had already won. But then, something shifted. The pendant, the key, pulsed again, stronger this time. Kalen could feel the magic, the power flowing through him, his blood reacting to it. A surge of energy exploded inside him, and for the first time, Kalen understood. The pendant wasn't just a weapon, it was a conduit, a link between the mortal realm and the ancient power that the Shadowlord sought to wield. No, Kalen whispered to himself, steadying his breath. I'm not your pawn. The Shadowlord's expression darkened. You cannot escape your fate. Kalen's fingers curled around the pendant as he closed his eyes. He focused, drawing in the power that flowed through him, channeling it into the pendant. The energy within the pendant seemed to answer, responding to his call. In that moment, Kalen understood that the only way to save Eldara, save himself, was to confront the truth. To embrace his father's legacy and use the power of the pendant to undo what had been done. You're wrong, Kalen said, his voice now strong, unwavering. I won't let you take everything. The Shadowlord's eyes flashed with rage. Fool! You think you can stop me with this? You are nothing. I control everything. But Kalen wasn't listening anymore. His mind was clear, his resolve hardened like steel. He raised the pendant high, the energy swirling around him. It was time to end this, once and for all. The world seemed to tremble as Kalen unleashed the full force of the pendant. The chamber erupted in light, blinding and pure. The Shadowlord roared in fury, his form flickering as the energy from the pendant clashed with the dark power that held him together. You cannot defeat me, the Shadowlord screamed, but his voice was weak now, faltering as the light consumed him. Kalen felt his father's presence, faint but still there, deep within the dark magic. He could feel the soul of his father, trapped and lost in the Shadowlord's grip. Kalen's heart wrenched with pain, but he knew what he had to do. With a final cry, Kalen poured every ounce of his strength into the pendant, pushing the dark force away. The energy exploded outward, engulfing the Shadowlord in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, everything went still. The air was thick with the power that had been unleashed, but it was quiet, deadly quiet. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. When the light faded, Kalen found himself standing alone in the chamber. The Shadowlord was gone. The fortress was crumbling around him, and he could hear the sounds of battle from outside. But the darkness had lifted. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight that had haunted Eldara for so long finally lifting. Kalen dropped to his knees, exhausted and drained, the pendant still clutched in his hand. He had done it. The kingdom had been saved. But at what cost? As the sounds of his companions' voices reached him, Kalen looked up, a tear slipping down his cheek. He had saved Eldara, but the price had been high. His father's legacy was a broken one, tainted by darkness. But in the end, Kalen had chosen to be his own hero, forging his path and refusing to fall to the shadows. Eldara, Varian, and Lyra rushed to his side, their faces filled with both relief and awe. You did it, Eldara said, her voice thick with emotion. Kalen nodded, but there was a sadness in his eyes. The battle is won, but the war, it's never truly over. The kingdom was free, but as Kalen stood before the ruins of the Darklands fortress, he knew this victory was just the beginning. Eldara had been saved, but there would always be more darkness to fight, more battles to win. And Kaelin had come to understand something far more important. It wasn't the power of the pendant or the legacy of his father that made him a hero. It was the strength within himself, the courage to fight, even when all seemed lost. The road ahead would be long, but Kaelin was ready. The hero's journey was not over, it had only just begun. If you enjoyed Kaelin's journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in the saga. Join us as the adventure continues.